Well, hello and welcome to ATG the podcast, and I'm very pleased to be interviewing Rupert Gatti and Alessandra Tosi today, the co-founders of Open Book Publishers. Alessandra, can we start with you? I believe you're a historian.
Yes, well, in my previous life, I used to be a literary historian specializing on Russian studies, Russian literature of the early 19th century. But then, since we created Open Book, I devoted all my time to the publishing initiative rather than research.
Right, and as a historian, is publishing monographs part of your academic activity?
Um, well, it's my profession now, but it's not part of my academic activity as such.
Hmm. But and Rupert, you're an economist, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Economics at here in Cambridge. Yep.
Hmm. And now, do economists produce books as well? Is it do you output articles, books, or both?
Yeah. No, economists produce their research work is primarily articles, not really in books. So books are not highly rated in the economics profession. Uh, they're more done sometimes with collected editions and around a topic with chapters. But yeah, no, economists don't see books as being important.
So this is very interesting. So, and yet the two of you have collectively founded what I believe is the biggest independent open access academic book publisher in the UK.
Maybe I can tell you a little bit more how we started, which is quite interesting. So the connection between the academic work and the publishing initiative was very much my first book on Russian literature in the early 19th century, the book that stemmed from my PhD dissertation, and was really the readership for that book was quite narrow. It was quite a specialized field within Russian studies. So I never expected that book to be accessed by a lot of readers. But what I was surprised to see was that the book wasn't really read in Russian because Russian readers couldn't really buy it. It was too expensive for them. And then I really stopped and thought about this and said, I spent all these years doing my research, and then my target readership, which is already quite narrow, cannot access my work. And that was very worrying for me because I thought, well, when then I start thinking, why do researchers do their research if their readers cannot actually access it? What's the point of it? And so that really started the conversation with Rupert, thinking about, well, in the science, there is quite a bit of material that is openly accessible by all. Some journals are open access, but it seems to be very limited in the humanities and social sciences. Why is this the case? Why books are not open access? What is the problem? What is the obstacle? Can we do something about it? Because books are fundamental for research in the humanities and social sciences, maybe less in social sciences, but certainly in the humanities. So that's our main outlet for getting our research out there to our readers. And if this outlet is close to our readers, that there is a problem that we really need to face and sort out. So that's where we started. And then, of course, because we are in the digital era, we don't need a printing press. We can do things online. We can explore how to make open access work for the humanities. And so that's how we started.
And also the slightly and the as has been well articulated, but in the humanities, you really want to be engaging with a broad audience. Humanities as a discipline is getting some pushback in some places, saying, why bother? What good is it to society to have society being studied? And it doesn't help the discipline if nobody can access the works, because they're all the best work and all the recent research is being locked away behind paywalls. It means that the audiences, the broader public audiences that you do want to be able to engage with that work, can't access the work. And so that's a problematic situation to be in for the whole discipline. And so that also, we should be making sure that everybody can access this work so that the discipline can be engaged with.
And also, if I can add to this, when I said the narrow readership, that's what I initially thought. The readership would be narrow because the topic was quite specialized. But actually, what we have seen with the publications that we have put out there, they're free to read everywhere in the world, the number of readers is actually extremely high, even when the publication is quite specialized, because there is a lot of interest out there. A lot of people can actually read what we write as scholars, and we don't always appreciate that. There is a lot of knowledge and interest out there, which is outside the sphere of universities and scholarship as narrowly defined.
It's very gratifying to hear that you're getting high readership figures. But let's go back to that first book. This is back in 2008. Were there many academics must have been in your position, but were there any open access book publishers around that you could offer your book to at that time?
At the time, I didn't know of any. There were some. As a young researcher, I wasn't aware of any, and I must admit, I never heard the word open access before publishing my book. I wasn't aware of it at all. And I think, actually, I wasn't an isolated case. Back then, a lot of people in the humanities didn't know what open access meant. So when we started, we had to explain the concept of what we meant by open access to people, and then really start the conversation almost with every author that we approached, because the concept was quite obscure to especially humanities scholars. And now, of course, the situation is completely different. We are in a different place. But back then, things were just starting.
Even so, but there are plenty of academics, perhaps, who would benefit from having their book published open access, but not many of them found a publishing company. So, what motivated you to actually sort of go and create the whole business?
Well, one aspect of open access that has always worried me is the fees imposed to authors. So a lot of publishers then and now say that's very well, we can publish your work open access, but you have to find the money to finance this publication. And this is a sticking point for people, especially in the humanities. Humanities scholars typically don't have a research grant, so their book is not supported by any subvention. They're paid their salary, but the book is not supported by separate subvention. And so that is really a big obstacle to authors publishing in open access. So I think a lot more authors would love to publish in open access, but then they find this financial barrier to that outlet. So just finish, we created what is called the Diamond Open Access Publisher. So we don't charge authors for publication. So that has always been very important to us. So we have never charged authors, and we never will.
And I think also what motivated us to sort of start it was, not only all of this, but also recognize, we were grumbling to each other about the state of academic publishing for books and the lack of outlets like this, and saying, somebody's got to do, it's ridiculous, somebody's got to do something. And then we realized, here we are, we're two Cambridge-based scholars. If you wanted something to start somewhere, it's not a bad place to start. And if you wanted people to start it, then it'd be people that were there that were grumbling about it. And then you suddenly look in the mirror and say, guess what? It's us we're grumbling about the fact that we haven't started this. We should get our act together. So really it was, if not us, who? And that sort of changed our thought process, that actually, we had a responsibility to do that because we were in a position to do it, which many other people weren't in that, weren't in that position to be able to do that.
Alessandra mentioned the problem of funding, and you follow this very interesting mixed model. I'm able to see all this because you're very open about your finances, and I can see from your website where all the money comes from. So tell me a bit about how the mixed model works.
Shall I take that? Okay. Okay. So we've now, like any business model, it evolves, and it's evolved to this point, and it'll evolve going forward as well. As I'm sure, I can, like any organization. But at present, the model has three, or actually four, but the publishing component has three primary revenue components, and that is the sale of the printed works, the library membership scheme that we have, in which we've got about 270 libraries around the world that support us with a relatively small contribution as far as the libraries are concerned, maybe between £300 and £700 a year, depending on the size of the library. But that adds up, and so collectively about a third of our revenue comes through from that. And then, as Alessandra said, we don't require authors to pay any fees, but if there isn't a grant available to them, which quite often there is through a research organization or something like that, there could be a grant that's associated with publishing, and we do invite them to apply for that and make a contribution, therefore, via those. So about a third of our revenue comes through from each of those places. Of course, revenue is only half a business model; the other half is costs, and so it's been pretty important to us that we are fairly efficient in what we do, and taking digital publishing seriously, thinking about digital workflows seriously, and making sure that we have an efficient operation. And so it's costing us, as we say on our website, about £6,000 per title to be able to bring it through the process, and that's an important part of it. If you compare that to some of the costs that some of the legacy publishers proclaim to face, it's quite a lot, significantly lower than that, without a change, I believe, in the quality of the service.
You have a very different business model to when you look at the statistics for open access book publishers, and there are a few large publishers, but they're offering they run on very different principles, very much based around book processing charges, which are the equivalent of author processing charges. So there are companies like Intech Open and Frontiers who publish hundreds of titles in that way. Do you see yourselves competing with them in any way?
Competing, I guess we don't see ourselves as competing as such, and we can talk about it later. We really want to work in collaboration with people and to really move forward open access publishing across a field. So it's not a winner takes all game. It's the tide rises all boats, as they say. And so competition's probably not the right word. We do have problems with that business model in humanities and social sciences, and then and the ones you've mentioned are primarily publishing science fields, and there is more opportunity for those sorts of funds to be available in those fields. In the humanities and social sciences, the sorts of costs that are being imposed as book processing charges are unaffordable. They're unaffordable to the most well-endowed humanities faculties, let alone in universities that don't have that, let alone universities from developing countries, let alone the number of independent researchers that exist in the humanities and social science fields. And so as a business model, it's all very well for an individual company, but as a model for sustaining open access scholarly publishing in the humanities and social sciences, it's not a sustainable model, because the discipline can't sustain those sorts of costs. And so we're certainly providing an alternative, which we think is an important alternative. Competition's a different word, but certainly it's an alternative model we believe is got a really important role to play in the scholarly fields where we're publishing.
You've been active now for getting on for 20 years. So do you think you've demonstrated you have a sustainable model for open access publishing?
Well, I hope so. We are still going strong, and Yes, I think some other publishers have adopted similar models. Some other publishers are thinking about it. We also do work to help other publishers starting up a similar business or different business. But we believe that it's really important to have a range of different business models and a range of different publishers out there. So that's why we work alongside other organizations rather than trying to become one of these huge conglomerates ourselves. So the diversity is important in the offer that we provide scholars as well.
I certainly find it very impressive as somebody who's worked for one of the biggest university presses. It's well known. I'm not giving anything away that that monographs in the humanities are not where money is to be made. It's not where there's and there are question marks about the whole viability of that kind of publishing. So, do you think you might have reached a sustainable model that, as you say, other publishers can follow?
Yes, I believe so, as long as their aim is not to make huge revenues. I mean, I think this model works because we are a social enterprise, we are a non-for-profit, we reinvest all we earn in our operations. And I think this is very important for scholarly publishing. It's not something that will provide a lot of money if done properly to anybody. So I think you really do need non-for-profit organizations coming in, which is in a way going back to what the university presses used to be. They used to be organizations that were there to provide a service to the scholarly community and readers. And
Absolutely.
we can do this in a different way in the digital age with open access factored in, but it's the same spirit of something that is non-for-profit, because almost cannot be for profit. So if you do it properly and if you don't look at what sells but only what is good and you focus on quality, it's very difficult to make a profit out of these works. You will never sell a lot of volumes on something that is very specific, and you may have a lot of readers, but you won't be able to sell a lot of copies.
And you mentioned
And
you
also,
got some. Sorry.
sorry, just to pick up on that, we've worked over the last few years very closely with the COPEM project here in the UK, which has been funded by the Arcadia and Research England, and part of that is to really expand this type of business model to enable and enhance more publishers to be able to engage with this type of model through the Open Book Collective. And the Open Book Collective is there to try and scale, if you like, the model that we've got across libraries, across publishers, to help sustain this type of model. So yeah, it's expanding and also working to build the infrastructure to allow it to expand has been an important part of what we've been doing.
And the figures you've shown for readership, you said that the open access has produces some good results, and I'm highly impressed. It looks like your your most read title is one called Ethics for A Level, which has had something hundreds of thousands of reader sessions on the OBB platform alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been picked up as a reading, although as it's been said, it was designed for A-level students here in the UK. It's actually been picked up very broadly across the university sector in the US as well. I think another one of our largest is a book called Oral Literature in Africa. And that's been downloaded millions of times as well.
Thousands.
Hundreds of thousands, maybe not millions, but I'd have to look at the figures, but a lot. It's been downloaded a lot. And one of the interesting things about that is that the continent that has downloaded it the most is Africa. And so again, it's about outreach. This is a book which is about Africa, obviously. It's our highest downloaded book, and the largest proportion is so it's that reach. It's these are people who would not be accessing the work in other ways, and it's just again highlights the reach that you have with these types of works that you might not expect otherwise.
The ethics title is rather than a monograph, more a textbook. So, are you happy to sort of to be quite open in your selection policy for what goes onto the list?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we have a wide range of works from textbooks to very specialized text, and we also experiment a lot with embedded features, embedded materials, say audio, video material embedded in the text. You can have a book about musicology and listen to the music that the author is talking about. So all these elements are present in our book. So you could have, a translation, from a translation to an anthology to a textbook. So what we look for is quality, is the quality of the work. In order to ensure quality, we have a very rigorous peer review process. And apart from that, we are open to any sort of scholarly endeavor. We want to be a channel for people to be able to release their work the way they want to release it and the way that makes sense for that discipline and that individual book. And so we really try to enable that to happen rather than dictate what we want to publish. In terms of fields, we just look for quality, and quality across any field, any type of publication, any type of scholarly publication.
This attitude is strikes me as being very similar in some ways to what the open science movement is sort of is proposing, and the idea of being open to sort of to more kinds of publication and getting closer to what researchers are doing. Are you influenced by what's going on in open science at all?
Sort of indirectly, probably, rather than directly. I mean, open access is not a goal in itself. And I think maybe that the idea of open scholarship is, open access is a component of that. But, if open access was a goal in itself, then the book processing charge is fine. But the book processing destroys the scholarship environment in the background, and therefore it's about enabling engagement by communities with academic research, and that's primarily the goal of open science as well. So we're rowing in the same direction. Open access is part of our goal. It's clearly what we do, but it's not a you hit the pinnacle of open access, there's a whole mountain range still to climb. And so when it's part of the big picture.
And also, I mean, you can look at open access both ways, in terms of readership. The people you want to, they need to be able to access the work, therefore the work needs to be free at the point of access. But you also want to think about authors, and that's where experimentation and being open to new modes of publication comes in, because you want to serve authors as well as readers. And even letting aside the experimentation, even when you look at traditional works, you see that legacy publishers don't publish in an entire field of knowledge. So, there are entire points in times, entire centuries that are not touched by legacy publishers because they are deemed not marketable, they don't sell enough. And so that is really a very detrimental impact on research, because then entire field of researchers are not followed up because people cannot publish in that field. So you see how commercial considerations are at odds with scholarship in a very, very deep way, and how having a non-for-profit operation like ours, where you don't think about the marketing consideration, you just look for high-level scholarship, that can be really important for scholarship in general, for authors and for readers. So, you sort of join all these dots and create an ecosystem where research can thrive.
You mentioned, I think, that you've been involved with other some organisations and funders to promote open access. You mentioned COPIM and the Open Book Collective. Do you think that I'm very impressed that some of your initiatives have actually sort of gone well beyond what you expect a publisher could do? There's you've even created a kind of a metadata sort of framework called, I believe it's called.
Well, we call it tote.
Tote,
Yeah,
right?
so tote, yeah.
And how did
Yeah,
that
it's
come about?
spelled THOTH, but yeah, I think there's some ambiguity over the of the actual pronunciation, given that it's ancient Egyptian. But I'm told they didn't have a soft th, so but yeah, but. I mean, but that's exactly the an example of the sorts of things we struggle as a small publisher. If you take open access seriously, you want the works out as far as you can get them. You want them on all the various platforms. You want them to be accessible. You want them to be discoverable. You want people to engage with them. You just don't want them sitting on your website and saying, look, people will come to find them. That's not the point of the exercise. And as a publisher, that's not our role. Crikey, an author could put their PDF on their website and say, look, it's open access. So our role is to get the work out there. And it's actually quite a hard job for a small publisher, a really difficult job to be able to get them out, because all of these platforms require content in different formats, in different ways, with different structures. And so if we've got about 30 platforms that we're distributing to, and probably 27 different metadata formats that are required to get to those 30. And so this is a case where infrastructure can make a big difference. And so recognizing that a really well-formed database, which is able to have well-structured metadata at the background, was A, very useful for us in structuring our metadata, but B, enables all the reuse of that metadata to be automated. And so we didn't have to create 27 different spreadsheets, but actually we can have one database that can create all of that for us. And also, if that's got an open API, it can disseminate things much more easily to those platforms as well. So really the idea was, okay, if we can spin that off, that helps our problem, but more particularly, it then means that you've got an open infrastructure that other publishers can do to be effective in their dissemination. And it's that sort of open infrastructure that can support small entities such as us, which is really important, especially if that entity is itself not for profit. And so it's there to do the job rather than to extract funding from its users. And so Tote is there, being developed, being supported again by Research England and the Arcadia Fund to provide that database and to make it easy for small publishers to A, manage their metadata, but B, to disseminate their works.
We mentioned metrics and the number of downloads of some of your titles, but actually trying to count the usage of open access books is not a simple task.
No, and that's actually another project that we've been involved in, which was the formation of Opera's Metrics, which is a Opera service, which is also developing as we go along as well. But collating the data from all of those various platforms is itself a tough task, and because it all comes in different formats and different ways, but also everything is counted in different ways, and so you can't add content together. Some platforms split things apart into chapters. Some people use counter, others don't. Even within, so the process of bringing data, actually collating the data into a single place is difficult. But then the process of what you do with it, aggregating it, what does that mean? You really can't aggregate data across different platforms because it's been collected in such different ways, and so you're you're trying to add, apples and oranges together, and it's just doesn't. So you can come up with a number, you can come up with these numbers, but they don't mean anything, and so they look good, but it's really, if you really drill down into the numbers themselves, they're very difficult to really understand and draw meaning from these comparisons across platforms.
And the other difficulty, of course, is that open access works circulate freely, so people, can send each other a PDF. They don't need to download it from our website. So I think we capture probably half or even less than half of our readers by, with the measurements that we have on our website, and that's part of the issue, but it's also the beauty of open access, that the works are out there. And if I may add, an issue that we have been thinking about recently is also censorship. So, you can see that in some countries, censorship is now, even Western countries, is now a fact of life. But when the work is open access, there is no possibility of censoring it because it's already out there and cannot be recalled, cannot be brought back, cannot be eliminated. So I think that's very important going forward.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned two initiatives, Opera's Metrics and Taught, and these are very, very welcome. But one of the further problems in the open access landscape is such a fragmented kind of a mass of very small, relatively small publishers, and however welcome these initiatives are, there's still something of an uphill struggle, I would have thought, to sort of to try and increase the usage of open access books in a sort of in a general way. Do you not think?
An uphill struggle to get the usage of the open access books. Sorry,
to if you like, to fly the flag for open access books. To sort of if you look at, for example, library budgets, the proportion of library budgets that's spent on open access books is a tiny proportion of their overall spend.
Okay, so I think there's two or three components to that. Let me see. So the first of that is, you mentioned a lot of small publishers, and I think that that's a really critical part of the landscape. It's being able to have, that's something we should be celebrating. That's something that we should be embracing. That's something that we should be singing the praises of. Lots of small publishers give you that diversity, give you that interest, give you that engagement, give you all of the dynamic spontaneity that comes with small publishing. And so one of the reasons that we want to be involved in infrastructure creation is to ensure the sustainability of small publishing. So that's a real virtue. That's something that, I think we have to be able to sustain and protect. But it requires infrastructure to be able to do it. So if every single small publisher has to go around and make their own library membership scheme and have their own metadata dissemination platforms, it's unsustainable. But if you have good, strong, open infrastructure to support that, it is sustainable. And it's the sustainability of the small, scaling small. That's the COPA, it's the COPA motto. That's what it's all about. So the first up is that's what we need to protect, and that's what we need to celebrate. The second component of that is library support and library budgets. The libraries have been very supportive, and we're incredibly grateful to the support that we receive from libraries. They know what we're doing. We're an open access publisher, and they're supporting the initiative. They're also increasingly supporting these types of open initiatives, recognizing the value of community-owned, community-led publishing initiatives, and being able to see the value of that. And it's up to us as a community to be able to demonstrate the value of that. That what are these communities bringing, which the commercial operators, the large commercial operators, are not able to bring. And that's all the diversity, and it's all of the cost effectiveness, and it's all of the other things that are there. And so I think we are in a phase where we're working with libraries to think about how do we redirect more and more of, increasing parts of their budget away from the sort of the traditional legacy routes, and recognizing the importance and the value of the community-owned nonprofit routes, and thinking about how those library budgets can be not just gobbled up by a couple of, big commercial entities whose objective in life is to gobble up their budgets. And so, it's up to us as a community to make that case. And I think we're increasingly doing that. We've seen the Open Book Collective doing that in the journal world. We've got the Open Journals Collective coming out. We've had Open Library of Humanities before that. We've got, a number of initiatives that are coming forward across a range of areas to be able to say, listen, there's support, and it's important support, and libraries are considering and taking more seriously how to support those types of initiatives.
Also, if I can say something, just a general point, it seems to me really it doesn't make any sense to divert the budget of libraries, which is taxpayers' money, into sustaining commercial operations when there is a not-for-profit alternative. I think this is a very serious point. It's an ethical point, it's an economic point, and I think taxpayers need to know, who is getting our money for what. And if these commercial entities make huge revenues, it doesn't seem fair to me that taxpayers have to pay for it. So there is a very important point there for libraries to consider as public institutions. I think they have a duty to spend their budget wisely and to spend it for non-commercial operations that promote scholarship rather than the opposite.
I completely agree, but I'm sure you've read the ongoing discussion about initiatives like Subscribe to Open for journals and your own library membership system. And critics claim that because these payments are optional, there's always the risk that when the screws are tightened, the library will say, well, we haven't we don't have the budget. How do you counter that?
Oh, look, there's risks in every business operation, aren't there? I mean, if people don't want to contribute to your business, you know what? You're going to have a revenue problem. It doesn't matter. Okay, there is a free rider issue in this world. We have to take it seriously, and we have to be able to demonstrate value. Yeah, but me saying you don't get the content unless you pay for it, that's got risks too. So, all businesses have revenue risks. And, to say, whoa, there could be a revenue risk here. Well, whoopee. Thanks for that. I hadn't thought of that one. Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of frustrating that sometimes the vehicle for that sort of call is pretty predictable where it's coming from. And, if you want open access and you want open research to work, then you've got to engage with these types of things. If you don't want them to work, then there's any number of reasons that you can geez, I don't like, Antipodean accents. So you've got a problem with Antipodean, do you think that's going to be a problem with you in making relationships with, people that, anyway, sorry.
Have you encountered any resistance from academics to publishing open access rather than via the traditional payment model?
I mean, there is the old issue of prestige that, of course, academics, some academics, maybe most academics, I don't know if they like the branding, but they feel they have a better chance of being promoted if they publish with a certain publisher, with a certain, prestige. But I think that's up to academics to change the system and say, okay, I don't want to look at the publisher who published this book. I just want to look at the content of this book when I make a decision about somebody's career. And I think that's very important. And I think that's probably going to be on the rise, just looking at the quality of the work rather than the publisher's names attached to that book.
Going back to libraries, there's an interesting trend, particularly in the US, for libraries moving towards doing their own publishing. Do you think libraries should take more responsibility for open access publishing?
What? I can. Yeah, okay. So I think that, again, there's two parts to that. I think the short answer is yes. I think that there is incredible opportunities for scholars to be engaging in the dissemination of their knowledge in ways that they want to disseminate their knowledge. And that on the whole, there's been this sort of, the only way to do it is to pass it off to somebody else. And having said all that, there's always been, and there remains in any university, large numbers of small communities of scholars that are doing their own thing on the back of voluntary work and trying to say, look, I don't like what it is, I'm trying to do my own thing. And I think that there is now the scope for the infrastructure, open infrastructure that's available to really support and sustain those small initiatives and those small operations so that scholars can do what they want to do without having to be constrained by infrastructure. And I think that there's increasing amount of open infrastructure that is available to support small initiatives, and the libraries are in a very obvious place to take a leadership in bringing awareness of the infrastructures that are available for the scholars to use and helping support those infrastructures for their scholars. So yes, I think there is. Now, that's not the same as saying that it's the ex-university, that they all have to set up their own university presses, which maybe they want to for other reasons. It's about bringing infrastructure to enable scholarship. And I think the library has a really major role to play in that.
And what we see is that often they provide a hub. So authors go to the librarian and say, okay, I'd like to publish this work in open access. What are the avenues open to me? And they give them a range of possibilities. And one of these possibilities may be published with us. We set up a press as a library. That could be one of the options. But the importance of their role, in my view, is to offer a range of options, and authors can then choose what is best suited to their work or what they want to achieve with their work. So to have just, as an information hub, really, that's the role that I see for them. But as well as publishing, if they have the infrastructure, if they want to take up their role, that's, of course, one of the possibilities.
Mm-hmm. There's a recent, I'm sure you read a recent Ithaca report on ebook business models that was published just a couple of weeks ago. I found that report remarkably kind of a small scale in terms of largely looking at the US rather than initiatives in Europe. Do you think there's still a need for if you like, looking outside the silo at other areas, other methods, and sort of communicating what those methods are?
Absolutely. I mean, you just look at what's happening in Latin America. You look at the initiatives that are growing in Africa. You look at all around the world. I think there's more journals on the open journal systems from Indonesia than any other country. I mean, there's huge engagement around the world in open access and open scholarship. And I think the danger of this sort of silo that you mentioned is a two-way thing. All of this work is open, but it's not getting into the systems either. So it's not just me standing at the top of the hillside saying, how great my work is and being able to bellow louder because it's open access. It's also, being able to hear more. and there's other hills over there where people are yelling as well, and being able to pick those up and bring them into your scholarship. And that two-way flow is also missing, I think. This sort of concentration on our previously defined little niche clique of scholars is hopefully being broken down, and open access is an important role in doing that.
Alessandra, you mentioned some of your initiatives in sort of multimedia publishing, and another of your titles is a fascinating one. It's a bibliography. I think it's called the Lands of the Romanovs, and I found it as remarkable because it's collectively edited. So it seems to be an ongoing project. How did this come about?
So yes, that's when you have a bibliographical research of that kind, is actually quite likely that other people can add to that scholarship quite easily. For example, a librarian can find a source that wasn't listed in the book, and so why not make it open and give everybody the chance of adding scholarship to that fundamental work, which is mapping just the key works in that field, but giving others access to, in terms of editing and adding information to that fundamental work. So that was an interesting project, which we're very proud of.
It seems fascinating because it seems very close to what's been described in the publish, review, curate model over in some of the sort of more innovative journal publishers. The idea of a kind of more collective authorship, the idea of having text reviewed in public before they're published in final form. So, do you have plans to sort of to use that methodology for any other books?
Not directly, but some of our authors experiment with that. So they do make their work public before publication or before submission even, and then they invite comments. But we see in the humanities that works best when authors invite people to participate. I think there is a little bit of an issue of making people aware that the work is there and they can comment on it. So that's something that we haven't really quite sorted out yet, but it's probably more up to the authors now to invite comments and tell colleagues, this work is open, please tell others. And so it's word of mouth, even though it's online and everybody can participate. So that's what I've seen so far.
Don't you feel, as having created a truly digital publishing operation, it's an incredibly exciting moment in that it gives you the opportunity to experiment with these different models and to try things out in a way that more traditional publishers just can't do because of their size and sort of and history?
Absolutely. No, this is completely fascinating. And one of the books I always mention is the one on Diderot, Ramon's nephew, where the whole work is about 18th century music, and you can listen to the music while you read the work. And the important thing is that this music is not widely performed, so you may not be able to hear it otherwise. And that's been performed especially for this book. Is a project in the Conservatoire in Paris took part. The students performed these pieces, so it's really innovative in so many ways, because you can hear the music, but also you can hear music that is not often heard. So the music is made available, is available on YouTube as well, so you can come to the book through YouTube. And these are very technically very simple elements, but it just makes scholarship so much more interesting and relevant.
And can I just pick you up also? You said that large publishers can't do. I think won't do is probably they can do this. We've done it on much less finance. We didn't get any finance. We've got, fairly low revenue year on year. These big publishers that are making millions have decided, would spend this sort of budget on canvassing politicians, but would not spend it on experimenting with new forms of scholarship. So it's a won't do rather than can't do, and I think that's got to be taken seriously. It's a decision not to do this that has been made, which is concerning, and one of the issues that one should be concerned with what these large legacy publishers are doing for scholarship.
And also at a more granular level, I mean, we talked about acquisition, the fact that they don't acquire books in very vast areas of knowledge, but also at the granular level, they impose a word limit, they impose a limit in terms of images, they impose all sorts of limits to research, which have nothing to do with research, the quality of research, and the book you want to produce. They're just preset limits. And in terms of also series, a book has to fit in a certain topic, in a certain series. What about if a book is interdisciplinary, not experimental, but simply tries to look across different areas of knowledge? So these are all really quite substantial problems that we have with the commercial publishers as it is set up at the moment.
Do you think, finishing off, going back to your roles as researchers, your involvement with the setting up open book publishers has changed your practice as researchers?
Well, yes, as I said, I don't do any active research because I just don't have the time, so I devoted myself completely to that. But certainly has changed my outlook on research. So if I ever were to go back, which is unlikely, I would do things very differently now.
Rupert?
Yeah, and again, the one's outlook on research is completely different, and the role that I've seen for research has changed undoubtedly by the experiences that one's gained with this. I haven't published a book though, so.
Remarkable. Well, it's a great story. It's fascinating that both the survival and your success and all the various initiatives that Open Book Publishers has been involved with during existence. It's very impressive. So many thanks for your time, and it's been great to talk to you and to hear about how it all happened. And let's hope, Rupert, that one day you get to publish a book and you publish it with your own your own publisher.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.